UNLV Microcertificate Economics. We're going to talk about socialism, communism, isms. There isn't, but it depends on who you talk to and whether communism and socialism are really different. There's different variations of socialism, and there's all this stuff. I'm not a communist, socialist, Marxist. I'm going to try to be fair because that's my job, but we're going to wing it. The rise of socialism actually starts with people that we, in the modern world, call utopian socialists, even though they weren't really utopian. We get that word because Thomas More wrote this book called Utopia about this perfect world that would come to be out into the future. These folks believed that there was a way that everybody could just work together, right? We know from economics that working together is better than working apart. There's a reason why we don't let you talk during exams, and there's a reason why we don't let businesses sit in a room together and talk about what prices should be. Cooperation actually is a very powerful thing. And so the utopian socialists believe that using, scientific principles and using things that are true in the modern world, we could work together and create a society that's good for everybody, that makes everybody better off, and it's peaceful and it's utopian. So we get people in this group, for example, Robert Owen actually was a rich industrialist, and he created sort of towns where everybody was, equal, kind of, and he experimented in socialist communities around factories. He was very big on education and against child labor, and there's elements of things that these folks propose that are still around in our world. So, and if you read about these people, they were pretty strange people as people go, but anyway, utopian socialists. Back again, we have these three questions: what to produce, how to produce, who benefits from that production. In a capitalist world, it's the free market that does it. It's the buyers and sellers. It's this process. In socialism, the idea is that the government is going to answer those questions using scientific principles of some kind. They're not going to do what's best for them. They're going to do what's best for everybody. Karl Marx, he wrote the Communist Manifesto. That's communism, but many people refer to his theory as scientific socialism. And again, don't get caught up in the phraseology. This is mid-1800s, 1840s through the 1860s. Communist Manifesto, Das Kapital, profound effect on the world. Most of his theory is a classical economic theory. It's similar in its fundamentals to Adam Smith and Adam Smith's followers. He is going to take that theory and suggest that it leads to other conclusions. First thing that you have to understand about Marx is that Marx believes that this is a history, that there's a history of class struggles in society, that what's going on is a natural consequence of all of these class struggles that have gone on over time, and that the current class struggle is between the owners of capital, the Tony Starks and Henry Fords, and the workers who work for them. But there's always this conflict between something. That we had feudalism before, and there was a conflict between the peasants and the nobility. There's always conflict, class struggle. Society gets divided up into groups, into classes. Marx believes, as did Adam Smith and his whole group, that labor is the creator of value, that capital is sort of stored up labor, that what capitalists do is they bring together this business. The labor creates the value, but the capitalists skim off the top, which means labor is being exploited. Labor is not being compensated its true worth in the process. So it's not that he doesn't think that capitalism did good things. He says the following: it has accomplished wonders far surpassing Egyptian pyramids, Roman aqueducts, and Gothic cathedrals. It has conducted expeditions that put in the shade all former exoduses of nations and crusades. In other words, the capitalists have done remarkable things. And he's not saying that that's not true. What he's saying is that the system did that on the back of the workers. So here we go. If you haven't seen Modern Times Charlie Chaplin movie, there's a little pic from it right there. You should go see that. Owing to the extensive use of machinery and to the division of labor, the work of the proletarians has lost all individual character and consequently all charm for the workman. He becomes an appendage of the machine, and it is only the most simple, most monotonous, and most easily required knack that is required of him. So workers, instead of doing something that requires skill in which they can enjoy and love and take pride in, they're an appendage of the machine. As they produce more and more and more, their wages are going to go down, down, down. They're going to be worse and worse and worse off. Workers are being eaten up essentially by capitalism. And then, no sooner is the exploitation of the labor by the manufacturer so far at the end that he receives his wages in cash that he is set upon by the other portions of the bourgeoisie, the landlord, the shopkeeper, and the pawnbroker. So bourgeoisie is the capitalist, proletarian is the worker. Don't worry about that. All through society there are classes, and the workers are at the bottom of the rung. They're the lowest class, and they're being set upon by everybody who's above them and being taken advantage of. Part of the problem here now is that capitalism is going to keep expanding production, but the workers who buy this stuff aren't expanding, and their income isn't expanding, their wealth isn't expanding. They can't buy all this stuff. So capitalists have to become what a Marxist would say is an imperialist. We would say a globalist. So Marx predicts that capitalism and globalism and the need of a constantly expanding markets for its products chases the bourgeoisie across the entire surface of the globe. We get globalization. It must nestle everywhere, settle everywhere, establish connections everywhere. And then the big finish. This is the last paragraph of the Communist Manifesto. The communists disdain to conceal their views and aims. They openly declare that their ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. Let the ruling classes tremble at a communistic revolution. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a world to win. Working men of all countries, unite. So, if you ask someone a Marxist phrase, a lot of people say, workers of the world unite, they have nothing to lose but your chains, but Marx had never actually said it that way. He said it this way. Unlike the utopian socialists, the scientific socialists, the Marxists, the communists, they believe that there has to be forcible overthrow, that the workers have to forcibly take society from the bourgeoisie, from the capitalists. Okay, so not as pretty a picture as the utopian socialists were going to draw. It's life. In our modern world, the most common kind of socialism we run into is something called democratic socialism, which some people take as Two words that don't go together. Democratic socialism takes the idea that democracy is actually a good thing, and that in fact maybe we don't have enough of it, and they apply it in some interesting ways. Tied to all this is the concept that socialism, right? There should be some form of social ownership. So there are different types of democratic socialism, but they all revolve around democracy and some form of social ownership. So again, can we get democracy in a business? Can we have democracy in more parts of our lives than just the political part? Good question. The democratic socialists obviously believe that. Democratic socialism is most prominent in Europe, but there's people, and I should have mentioned it on the first slide, Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, they really fall under that paradigm of democratic socialism. So as we're going to talk about repeatedly in the first part of this class, economics assumes that businesses are primarily interested in making money, that's their job, is to go out and make money. And Adam Smith, again, our buddy Adam Smith, believed that they should be allowed to go out and make money as best they can. But he believed that competition would keep bad things from happening. In fact, competition would make good things happen, right? We go to that restaurant, service is bad, food is bad, we don't go back. So for a business and to make money, we have to have good service. You have to have a good product. You have to have reasonable prices, okay, as long as there's competition. Now, let's suppose that, in fact, that restaurant is doing the right things. Great service, great food, great prices, and it's making a lot of money. If it's maybe the only restaurant in your neighborhood, what should happen is what we call entry. New businesses should come in. Businesses should recognize that profit. That profit is an incentive. It's a signal that there's room for more businesses. And the more profit that one restaurant makes, the more of a signal and the more interest there should be on other people coming in and opening up restaurants. And as long as there's freedom in our society, that's exactly what should happen. And we should get a whole bunch of restaurants, right? A whole bunch of restaurants. The first one won't make as much money. Collectively, they might make more, but we're going to have better and better situation for the consumer. This is going to benefit the consumer. It's also going to benefit the worker. When there were 35 different companies that each owned one casino in Las Vegas, the best workers were sought after. One hotel would always want to know what the other hotels were doing, and they'd have spies in there, and sometimes the spy would come back and say, hey, this pit boss is really great. That dealer's really sharp. And people would get offers to go work at different companies. And sometimes people would work at 10 different companies during their career, each one a step up because people recognized who they were and gave them opportunity. When Las Vegas went down to having 2 companies that owned 85% of all the hotel rooms, that stopped. And salaries went down, mobility went down. It was harder and harder to find that job and find what you're doing. So Amazon makes a lot of money. Jeff Bezos there makes billions and billions of dollars, and yet that billions and billions doesn't seem to come down into the hands of their workers, who tell stories about what working conditions are like, and we don't know, unless you've ever worked for Amazon. But in Adam Smith's world, a competitor should start up to Amazon and deal with that, the invisible hand. But maybe it's difficult or impossible for a competitor to start up and take Amazon's spot. Democratic socialists would deal with some of these problems by extending democracy to the workers. So workers should participate in management. Workers should, say, sit on the board of directors. In Europe, it's kind of normal for unions to actually have representatives on the board of directors and participate in the management of the company. If the workers have more of a say in how things run, then maybe there'll be better balance between how much money the executives make and how much money the workers make, and what benefits the executives get and what benefits the workers get. If we can do that in a way that keeps the company strong and maybe makes the company better, and democratic socialists might argue that the voices of those workers will actually help make the company better because they understand what the company does better than senior management does sometimes, we can make, again, maybe everybody better off. At least that's the argument. Okay, so again, there's different kinds of democratic socialism. So some of them want the government to own bigger pieces of the economy. Maybe the government should own the transportation networks. Maybe the government should own the utility companies. Maybe the government, different ideas. And, of course, there's ideas of worker ownership, that maybe the people who work in the company should all get a stake in the company when they work there. So when the profits of the company occur, they get split up. And part of that profit getting split up means those profits flow to the employees, right, which have an incentive now to work hard, to do better, right? We're good. Democratic socialists believe in extensive government benefit programs, health care for everybody, child care, education, a variety of government programs that benefit everybody. They also believe in more extensive government regulation, right? And related to that, this idea that profit should not be the only motive of companies. So you want to instill in companies a social concern. You want to instill in companies an environmental concern, say. And that somehow the company needs to balance its profit desires with the welfare of its workers, the welfare of its society, the welfare of the environment, all of those things. Okay? Everybody got that? The question here, and we're about to talk about the criticisms of socialism, but the question here is, how do we create a system that supports freedom for individuals, that gives them choice and freedom? How do we create a system that creates positive incentives, not what economists call perverse incentives? How do we make sure that if we're not going to let the Jeff Bezoses become gazillionaires, that they still want to invent the company? You still want those kids in the dorm room inventing Google, and you still want them to have an incentive to do that, which tends to be, I'm going to get rich. How rich is rich? What's the right incentive? All of these are questions that society has to answer. The pure socialist economies, we'll see, maybe had problems answering those questions. And how do we make sure that what we're doing reflects the goal of the broad society? One of the criticisms of the current capitalist world is that politicians do what they do for their donors, not for the people of their state or city or county, or not for the best interests of the country, but they're there doing what Big Pharma wants because that's where their money comes from. They're doing what Amazon wants because they get money from them. Okay? So the system is complex, and we're going to talk about lots of this stuff at various points in the semester, but we need to talk about some criticisms now.